Reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 15th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now, all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to the father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided the property among them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pod that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to himself and said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am, dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' The father said to the slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it. And let us celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and was alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has gotten him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go with. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat, that I may celebrate with my friends. But this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, and you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" The Gospel, the good news of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. I'd like to invite my young disciples. This story of the prodigal son, in my opinion, but arguably, is really the greatest parable that Jesus ever tells in all 4 of the Gospels. It is a story about one man who knew from the beginning and what 2 others had to learn. It's a story about eyes being opened. The eyes of a younger brother opening to what he could be if he went home where he belonged. And an older brother's eyes being open to what is really important. And it's really important to remember that this story is offensive. It is an outrage to the Pharisees of Jesus' day, the ones he was directing it to. And if you really understand the full meaning of this story, it is a scandal to many, many Christians today. You see, the Pharisees believed we are righteous because of what we do. We have earned our place next to God. We follow the rules. We have the name.
We are saved. They are lost. The scripture says so. It reads right there. How can you possibly associate with those who don't do what is required? And so Jesus' response, he tells them a story, which is really three stories woven together. A story of two people who had no idea of who they were, and a story of one who knew exactly who both of them were. So we have the younger son, known as the prodigal. Now, who was his father to him? In the beginning, he was a means to an end, the earliest version of an ATM machine. His father was for him something he could get from. To this young man, his father wasn't real. There was no real relationship. Give me my share of your inheritance. Give me what is owed to me, what I'll get someday when you die. I want it now. And then, a few days later, bye, Dad. And that was it. His father probably was a part-time interest, only important when he wanted. And then came the great request, followed by, I don't need you anymore. And when we separate ourselves from God, we end up somewhere sort of where he did. Empty and alone and forgotten by most, but not all. There was still a father who remembered. And even when this younger son was having parties and pathetically throwing money around to people who had no interest in him other than what they could get from him, even when he was abandoned and alone when his money ran out, even when he was throwing slop into troughs for pigs, probably smelling a lot worse than they did, even then, even in that state, he was a child of his father, as we all are. All of humanity are children of the Spirit, because being a child has nothing to do with what we do or what we don't do, but it is simply who we are. I'm sure all of us have heard on the news over the past few months the slashings that are happening in New York, on the streets and in the subway. This parable teaches us that these men who do this, as horrific as it is, as violent and brutal as it is, they are children of God, sons of God. Malala Yousafzai, this young Muslim woman fighting for equality in the Middle East, is a daughter of God, and probably closer to the kingdom than most of us. King Kim Jong-il, who is leader of North Korea, who on Thursday ordered the army to get their nuclear weapons in a state of readiness for all of his bizarre and aggressive behavior, is a son of God. One who has the same spirit in him that we all do. Because being a child is about the spirit that has been breathed into us, not what we do or what group we say we are a part of. Now, people can live as a child. They can live a life worthy of a child of God, follow the Spirit or not. But they are still children, no less loved than we. But people sometimes don't understand who they are. And think about this son. Think about the high point of this parable. What was the fire in his belly that moved him to wake up? It wasn't knowing that he was deeply loved. It wasn't that his father would receive him with open arms. It wasn't a sudden burst of divine grace that he understood that he was a child beloved by his father. It was none of those things. It was the idea that he didn't have to settle for scraps, that there was more for him. How much bread do my father's servants have, and more? It was the idea and the realization that this life he was living wasn't all he wanted. He began the journey looking for what he wanted and moving away from his father to find it. He ended the journey by realizing what he needed he could only find by going home. Now, as I was reflecting on this parable over the past week, I wondered what the father might have said to his younger son if, in some chance, he had met him out in the world, in the town he had moved to, while he was having a good time with his money. Maybe it would have sounded something like this. What are you looking for out here? Why are you getting so caught up in things that aren't important? Anxiety about what you have and what you don't have. Losing your identity and yourself and trying to be liked by others. Chipping little pieces of your spirit away. Trying to control things that you cannot control. What are you searching for? I have known you from the first time you opened your eyes and even before that. I know who you are. I know what you need in your life, and I will show you how to find it. And no matter what you have done or what you haven't done, how far from me you think you've gone, I am part of you, and you are part of me. Stop trying to find what you cannot find. Stop trying to make yourself happy. You cannot. You can have more than this. There is something better. Follow me, and let's go home. Now, this parable is known as the prodigal son, referring to, obviously, the younger son. And there is much to learn about what it is to be a child of God through him. And Jesus clearly means to speak about who God is through the Father in the story. But in some ways, this story is not at its heart about either of them. It's really about the older brother. After all, it was the Pharisees who provoked Jesus to tell this parable with their arrogance and their ignorance and their intolerance. And the Pharisees are clearly the older brother in the story. So what is this older brother trying to say? What is broken in him that Jesus is trying to fix? What he was trying to say by protesting is this. This isn't fair. This doesn't make sense. I'm the good one. I do what I'm supposed to. I follow the rules. How can you love him? How can you still consider him your child? How can you welcome him? How can you expect me to say that he is welcome in your house, my house? That he is the same as me? I fit the description of good, of normal, of right, of pious, of faithful. Not him. Because we think we know what is right and holy and good in the Spirit's eyes. This is a shocking, quite honestly, offensive message that Jesus is teaching. It was a slap in the face of the Pharisees who marked everything by the rules that were followed. For the Pharisees, for many Christians and Muslims and Jews, this is what makes you a child. How you adhere, how you follow. But what Jesus is saying in this parable is there is more. Jesus tells us in this story what the father says to the older son in the parable. But I wonder what else the father might have said to this older son once he came inside the house. Once the party was over and the music had ended and everyone went home and the servants were asleep and it was just the two of them. Maybe something like this. Your beauty doesn't come from being different and set apart, but from something much deeper. You are good because you are part of me. And your younger brother, even when he was out in the world, spending all of his money, my money, doing all the wrong things, even then he was a part of me. And no matter what he has done, no matter how he has hurt you or hurt me, no matter who he has killed, no matter his immigration status, what religion she belongs to, or if she doesn't believe in me at all, in the end, I want you to know that you are no less and no more than this other child of mine. We are all both the younger son and the older son. We need to turn our face back to home and let go of the scraps and the husks we've been eating and realize that there is a relationship we need to reconnect with. And we have to look at those who we see as so different and maybe less than us, but no less loved and precious to the Spirit. The prodigal son. For years, I believed that this word prodigal meant lost or wandering. What it means is lavish, one who gives away without thought or care, a person who is reckless and extravagant with what they have. I think that Jesus, in his story about the prodigal son, was really trying to tell a story about a prodigal father, who in our eyes is reckless and extravagant in how he views all people who are all his children, loving them, watching them, and sending them good things in order to call them home. And the lesson that we as Christians are meant to be is prodigal in our respect, prodigal, extravagant, lavish in our compassion for those, all those, regardless of what they do or what they believe, who share the very same spirit that we do.